Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Ben and welcome to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast, Australia's first barbecue podcast. This is the second episode in a series of 10 that I like to call Comp Ready, where I interview experts in all areas of competition barbecue to help you be comp ready. In this episode, I'm chatting with Billy Gibney, the owner of Meat at Billy's, a butcher shop, now two, based in Brisbane, Queensland. Billy has become the go-to guy for competition barbecue cuts, and I personally have competed using Billy's meat and have found it to be far superior to others I've used. He's dedicated himself to studying the cuts of meat used in competition barbecue and in bringing only the best product to market. In this conversation, Billy teaches us all about competition cuts, including where to get the best, how to choose the best, and some butcher's tricks for how to best cook them. Check it out.
This is the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast with barbecue pitmaster Ben Arnott. How long's it been since your last confession?
Alrighty, thank you for joining me in the confessional today, Billy. So how are you, and what was the last thing that you barbecued?
Well, thanks. Firstly, say thanks for having us, Ben. Appreciate it. It's an honour. But believe it or not, I just came from work to do this, and I actually have some pork butts and some beef short ribs in my radar hill at the moment as we speak. So just finished wrapping, so I'll let one of the boys take care of the rest. Yeah, I'm pretty confident on it.
So it's going to be a nice dinner at your place tonight then?
Yeah, it's actually a favour for a family friend who got a catering thing to do tomorrow night. So, but I did cater that little bit extra. So yeah, that will be dinner tonight, I think.
Very nice.
Butchers don't eat it first, of course.
Well, yeah. It's first in, first served a bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
and there's always that bit that accidentally falls off on the ground. And
yeah, that's right.
Yep. Fair enough. All right. Well, Meat at Billy's has become synonymous in Queensland with top quality competition cuts. So my question is, of all the different cuts and styles of meats that a butcher could sell, why barbecue? And when I say barbecue, I mean low and slow.
I guess it's changed a lot over the last few years. We've seen a massive trend of people sort of getting into it. And I think it all started, these barbecue teams, that's where I was introduced. They just sort of have opened up the world of American barbecue. I think people realise they were so scared of it or thought it was too much, or you had to have, a chef background to get into it. But I think making it so public with all these competition and events has really brought people forward and encouraged people to try it, and start on your basic sort of kettle. And then if you really get into it, you can work yourself into buying an offset. And yeah, people realise that it's fun. You can drink beer while you do it. And it's quite social overall.
It is, isn't it? It's the second sport that you can play with a beer in one hand.
Exactly. The lawn bowls, is that the first one?
Lawn bowls is the first one. Yep. That's an old joke about lawn bowls. I've heard that for a couple of years, but now we've got barbecue as well. So
yeah, that's fantastic.
Awesome. So about barbecue itself, have you always been into barbecue? What's your earliest barbecue memory?
I think the earliest was when I was approached by the Brisbane Barbecue Mafia, who a lot of people probably know quite well now from their catering. They approached me looking for a sponsor to go into this competition. And I'd eaten at Smoke or Blue Smoke in the New Farm. I always loved American food, but that was pretty limited on what you could get in Brisbane probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yep.
They approached me and they told me what they're about, and I met Drew and Chris, and I really liked what they were doing. So I thought, yeah, I can see this is going to be great. So I got them to do a demo out the front of my shop, and they got there at like 4 a.m, and they cooked all morning. And when they came time to serve, the crowd of people we had was just unbelievable. And I was lucky enough to get some ribs and a bit of brisket, and they were the best meat I've ever had.
Oh, right.
And it sort of went from there, really.
Yeah, it's funny how people will start just turning up once the smoke starts rolling. Even if
and as you know, when you've got a couple of smokers going, the smell that comes wafts down Waterworks Road, it was just incredible. There's people coming from everywhere, and yeah, it was really good, and it sort of made me appreciate how you can take a secondary cut like a brisket or a piece of pork shoulder and turn it into the eating quality of life fillet with so much more flavour. Yeah,
right. Yeah, that's true. You've told me in the past that your best barbecue memory was when you rolled up to 2015's Blues and Barbecue Festival in Port Macquarie. So for the listeners out there, could you set the scene and tell us what that was like?
Yeah, well, I thought being a sponsor, I thought I'll do the right thing and go support these boys on their first competition. And I remember I had no idea what I was in for. I remember going down to Port Macquarie. We drove all day, got there late Friday night. I got up early Saturday morning. I said to my wife, I said, I'm just going to shoot down and see the boys and give them a coffee and see how they're travelling. And I remember walking down to this caravan park on the beach at Port Macquarie, and my jaw dropped. I just saw this 50-plus chimney stacks with smoke coming out, the most beautiful smell, and I just could not believe it. And I thought, everyone here is cooking meat. This is a butcher's dream.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Captive market.
I was blown away, and yes, from that, it's just sort of gone leaps and bounds for us with the connection and network that we've sort of made.
Oh, fantastic. Great. Yeah. So being a butcher gives you a deep insight into meat naturally. So does that insight then give you an advantage in cooking barbecue? So are you a good barbecue cook yourself?
Look, I learned like everybody else. Nobody's perfect. I think everybody starts a little rough, but I've been very blessed to have the guidance of some very good barbecuers with, like I said, the connections I've made. It's trial and error. I source some pretty good meat, but I'm not one of these guys that keeps the best for themselves. I'd rather give the best to someone who's going to appreciate it.
Sure.
But overall, I'm forever on the hunt for new producers doing new things, and everything from brisket right through to independent pork farming, which is what I deal directly now. So I'm always looking for high ethics and quality product throughout.
Yeah, right. Okay. So do you have a specialty that you love to cook and cook well? Like, what's the best thing that you cook?
Oh, look, I'd have to beef short ribs. They're Cape Grim ox short ribs. I'm sure
I love them. Yeah,
out there know what I'm talking about. They're just a beautiful 3-rib plate rib. They're well marbled for a pure grass-fed cattle. That you've got marbling like Wagyu, and they're easy. You can sort of don't have to be doting on it, all day. They're going to get them done in 6 hours, and they're just sensational. They've got the best flavour. Yeah,
I think beef ribs are my favourite thing to cook too.
Yeah, that's the one I put new customers straight onto when they come in and they've just bought a smoker. I always plate of beef short ribs. It's the best way to introduce you, I reckon.
Absolutely. Yeah, so my final question for segment number 1 then is what barbecue do you personally use?
I'm lucky enough to have a sweet 16-inch Radar Hill, which is I bought in the beginning when I met Rob from Radar Hill. He sort of looked after me, and since then I use that for bigger events if we've got a group of 10 plus people coming over. But I had a Weber kettle which sort of died on me, and about 3 or 4 weeks ago in council cleanup I found one on the side of the road. So I did a U-turn, almost caused a car accident, I'm pretty sure. Because I had this beautiful black Weber kettle. It's probably 15 years old, sitting there. I've fallen in love with that. I've been cooking on it every night since. It's a great thing just to have at home when you're in a hurry. It's cooking over charcoal. You can still use your woods and everything from steak through to like a roast chicken. Just sensational. So they're my 2 go-tos, I'd say.
Beautiful. Yeah, I've actually got 3 Weber kettles myself that I picked up all 3 for a grand total of $75. So, and I just popped some not true thermometers from Radar Hill in them, and they're good to go.
Yeah.
They're so versatile.
Yeah, I know. You just think people just leave them on the side of the road. They're crazy.
You're listening to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast with barbecue pitmaster Ben Arnott.
So how long have you been a butcher, Billy? Is it a family business?
I've been a butcher. No, not a family business. I started this on my own back in 2009. I started my apprenticeship back when I was 15. I got a clean-up job when I was 13 after school in a butcher shop. A mate got me a job, and towards the end of my secondary college era, I spent more time at work than I did going to school. I get a job, and I was lucky enough the shop I worked in offered me an apprenticeship. So at the age of 15, I started my apprenticeship, and I was qualified by 19. So and then I went out and worked for various people, and when I was 25, I just finished managing a shop for someone and thought this is the time I want to go out and give it a go on my own, and the rest is history.
That's awesome, mate. That's so good. Mm-hmm. So were you always a specialty barbecue butcher, or is this something that you got into comparatively recently?
No, I dare say, like I said, when I met the Mafia boys, when I really fell in love with the barbecue scene and grew a passion for it, as did a lot of my staff. But before that, when I started my own business, I used to spend a lot of time going to Melbourne, and I saw their food scene down there, and Brisbane just didn't have it. But, my passion was to start a business where people came and wanted good, ethical, quality meat. They didn't mind paying a little bit more. They wanted good service, and they wanted something consistent week in, week out, and it just didn't seem to exist. So I jumped into it wholeheartedly, and just my passion was I wanted to be the best. I wanted to sell the best, and just try and revolutionise butchering as it had died off dramatically in Brisbane. So it's been a good ride, but I'm loving it, and it's good to see people. My passion is shared by my customers as well, which just makes what I do so much better.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's great to see sort of trends spreading up north, up here into Brisbane. People often joke that Queensland is 20 years behind the rest of the country, so it's fantastic to see people like yourself seeing something in your travels and going, oh, we should have that at home. And
yes.
and then bringing that back home and making it work here. So big debt of gratitude to you for that one.
Oh, thank you very much.
So why become a specialised low and slow cut butcher? What drew you to this style? Like in terms of the actual cuts of meat, is like
Look, it's something I've progressed with over the years. I mean, like I said, I've learned so much off relationships I've built with barbecue teams, as well as everyday low and slow people that come through the shop. Like 2 years ago, I didn't even know what a St. Louis rib was, and it was something that I still don't think there's many butchers in Brisbane who'll do them. So I went out of my way I took a trip to the abattoir, I spoke to my pork producers, and we created a boning spec, is what we call it, to produce St. Louis ribs. So I've progressed with it, one, because I love the food, I love the scene, I love the people, and two, I just see it as a huge point of difference for me in a market where you're limited to what you can buy. I wanted to be the guy who gets what people want, and that's sort of where I've learned as I've gone, and I just keep going forward with it. It's great.
Awesome. So I just want to pick up on something that you just said a little bit before. Did you say boning spec or bone in spec? And what does it mean?
Boning spec. So a boning spec, basically, when you go to an abattoir, whether it be beef or lamb, if they're breaking carcasses down, they run off a sheet, which is a spec sheet, so required by the customer, to how they break a pig or how they break a lamb. So we went through and altered the way they broke a pork belly to create a product that I could then continue to trim back further to create St. Louis ribs, because a pork belly is such a high demand product Australia-wide in our food scene, with all your restaurants wanting it. No one was really willing to sacrifice a whole pork belly to make a rib, but I found somebody that would if I bought the right amount, and came up with a solution.
That's awesome. I had no idea that there was such a thing as a boning spec. That's fascinating.
Oh, there's a million things I could tell you about how it all works, from the paddock to plate. It's the expression is used quite a lot these days. I'm still, like I said, learning. I'm spending a lot of time with farmers where I can at the moment, just to learn more about different breeds and different diets, just to create a better product. Right. Okay. So what research did you have to do to become as knowledgeable as you are in low and slow cuts? Did you go to the States and tour the States, or did you hit up? No,
how did you find out about it all?
Oh, probably good old Google. The internet sort of helps a lot. And like I said, I mean, the Mafia boys just got back from a trip to the US, which I'm hoping, fingers crossed, I'll go do with them next year. I've just networking and spending time with people who share the same passion, and the internet's quite powerful for learning everything off. I think you can go on and Google one thing and you've got 100 different answers, so you just sort of collate it and work it out yourself.
Yeah, it's incredible. We live in a time unprecedented with the access to information that we have now. It's just it blows my mind if I just sit down and have a proper think about it. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it's a powerful thing.
Yeah. So I remember having a conversation with a Brazilian guy a little while ago, and he told me that he had found it really hard to get Brazilian cuts in Australia because they're so different. And I never thought much about it, but then a few days later I was in a butcher shop and I saw posters for Argentinian cuts. And so I realized that, okay, this is a real thing. The cuts are all different in different countries. So for people that are new to low and slow, how are low and slow cuts typically different to Australian cuts?
Okay, so touching on the Argentinian style, like the two most common are your asada beef ribs, which is your beef short ribs, as I'm sure you can all visualise. But if instead of cutting them with the rib, you run them through the saw into thin strips, which are then done on a grill over charcoal. I think probably the South Americans are probably the kings of charcoal cooking. They've done it forever. And the other most common cut that you'll see is the picanha, which is the rump cap. The other problem we've had with that here in Australia is it is all highly exported because the rump cap's a delicacy in a lot of countries now, cooked on charcoal as well. So those two, there are some various cuts, but that just comes with research, I suppose. And same with what you've seen. The brisket is a good example of the low and slow scene. For years up to, probably 5 years ago, a butcher would take a brisket off his body of beef and he'd throw it in his sausages.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some gaffes out there right now when I say that, but without that knowledge or that influence we've had, we've taken a piece, as I said earlier, a piece of brisket which was a secondary cut, tough, unedible unless you braised it or cooked it for 10 or 12 hours. And the low and slow barbecues really brought in that scene of the flavour of it. And like I said, if you cook it right, it has a texture of eye fillet. It's an incredible piece to me.
Yeah. There's been a lot of that. As with any business, there's supply and demand, and as the demand changes, the businesses change. But yeah, I remember what you're saying about brisket, and the other one that comes to mind is lamb shanks. Lamb shanks used to be sort of you'd pay $2 a kilo for dog bones, sort of thing, and now they're like a delicacy. They're highly sought after, and they're attracting premium dollars. So it's
correct. They're more expensive than a leg of lamb, actually.
Yeah.
Now, because like every niche cut they find, there's only two on every carcass. So as demand goes up, price goes up. So it is frustrating, but unfortunately, that's just the way of the world.
That's the way of all businesses, mate. It's the way of all business, supply and demand. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. So which cuts then, because you supply a lot of the competition teams in Southeast Queensland, which cuts are the most common with teams, and more importantly, the winning teams?
Oh, well, there's a few. I'm sworn to oath here, mate. There's a few things I can't tell you. I keep a pretty tight lid on a few different cuts for certain teams, just because that's their little advantage point to everybody else. So,
fair enough. Totally understand that.
I mean, generally, I think with the ABA rules changing, that you could enter any beef into category. Now they're going to specialise a brisket and a rib category. So obviously sourcing the best briskets. A lot of the guys like the heavy, 8 to 9 score Wagyu briskets, which are available with us. As far as pork, we do all our pigs are fed on pecan nuts. Our farmer feeds them, which creates this unique sort of oily gelatinous fat, which is really fantastic for low and slow because it renders at a lower temp and it creates a really juicy product.
Oh.
As far as St. Louis ribs is another one. We bone your standard USA loin rib at a different way for some of them, with a little bit more meat. Like I said, I can't say too much or I'll be in trouble with a few people who hear this. There's a lot of different. They all have their own little signature, and I'm respectful of that and keep it separate.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's interesting about the new ABA categories. I think that's going to be very interesting at competitions. One thing that I always liked, being a budget conscious competitor, was that in the category of beef, I could put in a cheaper cut versus, say, a brisket. Whereas now, if I want to go to a competition that had a brisket category, I'm going to have to cook a brisket. So that's going to make the scene a lot different coming up in 2017, I think. But change is good. I do think that it's a very good idea. It's a positive way forward. And if it doesn't work, they can always change it back. So it's going to be cool. It's going to be very cool.
I do admire one thing I do admire though, like you just said, is I like to see the creativity of people when it comes to these competitions. So I think it's good if they have that chef's choice category, which I'm not sure if all of them do, but having that little bit point of difference, it makes it fun for judges, it makes it fun for the teams, and it's good to see people do things differently, low and slow. That's what I get impressed by.
Yeah, for sure. I think this year, I don't think Chef's Choice was counting to Grand Champions, just from the research I was doing, but I think next year it is included. I'll need to double check that.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so you've mentioned St. Louis ribs and cutting them with a little bit of extra meat, which I love to hear, because pork ribs are quite controversial in Australia, particularly after the ribgate that resulted after a certain TV cooking game show last year. So what makes a good rack of pork ribs, and what should the listeners be on the lookout for?
Look, I think quality of pork is that is your foundation for anything low and slow, is making sure you've got a good butcher who's sourcing good product. Like obviously you're looking for female pork, not male. There's a thing called boar taint, which creates quite a pungent odour, offensive odour, I should say, when cooking. So you're always looking for female pork. It's perfect for just everyday cooking as well as for barbecue especially. As far as specialty cuts of ribs, like I said, you've got a St. Louis, a baby back. You want some meat on your ribs. The problem with that is it has become short supply in Australia, because ribs is another thing that's on every single restaurant menu these days. So it is hard to bone that many pigs to keep up with the demand. So you're buying them direct from a producer, and they usually don't leave much on them. So it's finding the right connections to create the perfect rib, I think.
Yeah, I find a lot of the ribs that are readily available, you get meat between the ribs, but you don't really get any meat on top, and which makes them a bit tricky to cook. It's very easy to turn them into boot leather.
Yeah, correct. Well, as you can sort of tell, if they to leave the meat on top of the rib, if you can visualise boning a whole middle of pork to get that USA rib, they're sacrificing a key muscle group out of the rest of the loin, which is traditionally what they roll for a pork loin or keep for a whole pork belly. So it all comes down to supply and demand and who pays the most. And unfortunately, the pork belly is the highest demand at the moment. So the ribs are always going to be a little bit towards the lean side, unfortunately.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like we said before, it all comes down to supply and demand, doesn't it?
It does indeed.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned before whole pork bellies and having to sacrifice bits of pork belly to get ribs. For the people that are not in Brisbane and need to try and talk to their butcher and try and get their butcher to cut things the way they want them, how would you recommend they approach their butcher to do that, to get the pork ribs they want? Because, I mean, nobody likes to be told how to do their jobs, do they? So
no.
How would you recommend they diplomatically approach their local butcher about this?
Look, I think if they've got a good relationship with their butcher, the first thing I want to ask for is a rind off, so skin off, bone in pork belly, a whole one. And from that, you can, I guess, if you explain to your butcher about taking the top layer of fat off and following the seam to create a square belly rib, with a little bit of, if you were to be that simple about it, your butcher would figure that out. I actually think I'm looking into doing it myself, is posting some YouTube videos on how it's done. So whether you go and show your butcher a video, which there are ones out there, like American videos out there, on how St. Louis is done. So that would be something else you could show your butcher. But it comes down to, if you've got a butcher who wants to keep his community happy, I'm sure he'd be happy to do it for you. It's just, I'd be scared to know how much each butcher's going to charge you per kilo. That'd be the scary bit.
Yeah. I did find a butcher down here on the Gold Coast who would do it for me. The catch was I had to buy the entire bone-in pork belly.
Yes.
So
yes.
It was not possible to just buy the ribs. So that was, I think, the most expensive dinner we've had in a long time. But the good thing was,
did it taste better though?
It did. I got some nice big meaty ribs out of it. And then I had a whole lot of meat left over in the freezer for different stews and things as well. So it all worked out in the end. But I had to answer to the boss when I got home as to why I'd spent so much.
Just blame your local butcher. We take it all the time. It's always our fault. That's fine.
No, it's just I just bring that up though, just so that people are aware that if they do ask for a bone in pork belly, odds are they will be expected to buy the entire bone in pork belly.
Yes, that's what. Like I said, I don't know what it will cost you, but I really hope that there are more butchers out there, Australia wide, who are sort of coming on board with this scene, because it's great to have that point of difference for me, but I'm also passionate about the industry of low and slow, so I'd love to see some more butchers getting on board and following these cuts and going that extra mile to keep these barbecuers happy, because it helps our businesses continue to grow, and it builds a great reputation for any butcher out there that's listening. This is a great market for you to build relationships and really network and take your business to another level.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, so moving on to brisket then. What are some keys to picking a good brisket when they're in the butcher shop there?
I think another thing is, doing a research on the brands, like I said about the pork earlier, like finding a good brand. Like we've got, there's grain-fed, grass-fed, there's Wagyu briskets. You want to look for a brisket, and this is where all my boys barbecue, like all my staff are nuts about it. So we're also very lucky for our customers that we know good briskets. Like we can all go in the room and we'll pick through and go, no good, good, no good, good. Like you look for the flats where the point, it's the flat. You don't want a shallow divot there. You want a high yielding flat, because that means you're going to get a more consistent cook and a better brisket. Well trimmed as well, like not over trimmed, but deckle fat removed, which is something your butcher will know if you say that you want all the deckle fat removed. Removing like a lot of the excess tissue where the point sits on top, that's also a pinnacle to get that removed before you put it on a smoker. So, there is certain things to look for, but you want something, a high-yielding brisket. So something with that lot of meat, quite large in size. You want to be over between 5 and 7 kilos for a decent-sized brisket. Anything smaller than that, you're probably going to be disappointed with how much you get out of it.
Okie dokie.
I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely it does. Yeah, for sure. I've noticed when I've been travelling around butcher shops and that the only briskets I've seen are pre-packaged. They're all vacuum sealed. Is that the standard way? Like, does anybody sell fresh briskets?
Yes, they do, but this is a really good question, and there's a lot to learn from this. I think the biggest thing you want to know is that beef, as you're all well aware, it's been all over the media, beef is at the highest price it's ever been, on the Australian Eastern Cattle Index. It's ridiculous. So what's happening is now butchers are going away from the traditional breaking beef there because the labour costs are too high and the beef is too expensive. So you're better off getting it done at the abattoir to a spec, as I spoke about earlier, the bone-in specs.
Oh, yes,
The problem is if you were to break beef in your shops, a 5 to 7 kilo brisket would be coming off a cow that probably weighs about 350 to 400 kilos. So from a butcher's perspective, that's a huge, to break that into 4 pieces and try and cart it in your shop and break it down and the trimming and everything. And to do one body, give you 2 briskets, it's very, very time consuming. Whereas, with technology and the way these abattoirs and the way their chain works, they're breaking 400 to 1,000 bodies a day. And as far as the crybacking thing goes, it's actually a good thing. If you were to take a fresh brisket off a body and then trim it up, season it, it'd be horrible. Meat's got to rest, meat's got to age. There's dry aging and wet aging. Dry aging is the new big thing. Wet aging, however, is putting it in a cryovac bag and letting it sit. For us, I love to see briskets cryovac for at least 4 weeks, because in that 4 weeks, the muscle enzymes and the fibers of the meat actually break down as they release that fluid. So you actually create a better product by sitting it in that cryovac bag.
Oh, okay, so that 4 week period, do you mean 4 weeks before the brisket is sold or 4 weeks after the customer buys it? Should they sit in their fridge for 4 weeks?
No. Well, we age all of our meat, so we like to hope that our meat comes in and when the customer buys it, it's ready to go. But I always specify with my suppliers that I like to have a minimum of 2 or 3 weeks on my meat, and I hold it for a week and then I sell it. So it's at its best eating quality.
Awesome. Good to know. How long can people hold them in their fridges when they get home? Just on the topic of wet aging.
Beef is probably the one you're luckiest with. In the coldest part of your fridge, a cryovac bit of meat should last up to 90 days, as long as that seal is not broken. So, it's a case of red meat has the right sort of scientific makeup that it can actually last a long period of time without making you sick. And the longer you leave it, the more the muscle breaks down, the more tender the meat gets. However, you're not as lucky with lamb. You're probably lucky to get 2 to 3 weeks out of if you were to cry back a lamb shoulder and leave it. Pork is the same, and chicken is pretty minimal. It's only about sort of 5 to 7 days cry back to be safe. But beef, the longer you leave it, the better it'll get.
Okay, awesome. The key point being for the listeners to remember there is that it does need to be cryovac. Don't just grab some steaks.
Yes, correct.
Wrapped on a tray and just throw them in the fridge for 3 months and think you're going to pull them out and eat them. So the key
exactly right. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure the smell would be more offensive than trying to cook it if you left it like that.
Yeah, for sure. All right. So as a butcher, then, what is your favourite cut and why?
This is probably the toughest question of the day. There's so many. Look, I love all meat. My favourite cut, like as far as I'll talk steak, I love a good grass-fed sirloin. Hands down, my favourite steak. A little bit of salt, just beautiful flavour. I think it's the best flavoured cut of meat off the whole body. I also love beef short ribs. If we're talking low and slow, that, like I said earlier, they're my favourite. Pulled pork. Like I said, this is a hard question. I love meat. I love all of it. But yeah, I'd say a good bit of sirloin would be my go-to.
Alrighty. And do you slice them and grill it, or do you cook the whole lot in a large chunk like low and slow style?
Well, I used to do, before I discovered reverse sear, I used to just, barbecue quite a nice thick steak, but I've fallen in love with reverse searing, like on the kettle or the offset. So just, cutting it a little bit thicker. Also bone-in sirloin, which is off the T-bone end, the bottom of the T-bone end. Leaving the bone in, I'm mad about it at the moment because I just think it's got so much more flavour and it keeps it, more moist through that cooking. So yeah, I'd say a reverse seared bone-in sirloin would be my go-to. I had it 2 nights ago, actually. It was amazing.
Nice. You're still thinking about it now. Must have been good.
I am. I haven't had lunch either. I'm quite hungry.
Yeah, no, me neither. It's past lunchtime now too. So for those people out there who might not have heard of the reverse sear, could you just quickly explain to us what that is?
Okay, so yeah, traditionally the way we always used to do a steak was if it was thicker than an inch would be, we'd seal it first and then we'd pop it in the oven for sort of 15, 20 minutes on a lower heat. What we're doing is just reversing that process. So instead, if you're going to do it on your kettle, you get a nice charcoal pit going on one side of your kettle. Salt your meat quite generously, do a rub if you're preferable, and on the opposite side to the charcoal, you rest your meat there, which is on the offset heat. Put your lid back on. I did a 700 gram piece, and I think I cooked it for about 20 minutes. It was offset. So on the other side of the charcoal, I then took the lid off, moved it over to direct charcoal heat, and I did a 4-minute sear on each side. Popped it on a plate, bit of alfoil, left for a couple of minutes, and it was sensational. So it's just doing that traditional way. We're just reversing it, and it really does work. I think it creates more tenderness, and I really do think you get a better flavour with that offset heat first, breaking down that muscle or the protein of the meat itself, and then straight onto the heat at the end just to give it that nice crust. It really does work, and it's not as hard as what people think.
Is it the salt that helps form the crust? You mentioned to make sure that you salted it well.
Yes, I'm a huge believer in, before refrigeration existed, that's what they would do to keep meat preserved is salt it. And, your dry age rooms in cabinets now, they all got salt bricks in it. Salt is beef or meat's best friend, like a good generous coating of salt. I let mine come up to, room temperature generally, or just before, like leave it out for an hour prior to let that salt sort of soak in, because that sort of creates a nice barrier. But when you do see your meat, you get that nice crust. It adds good flavour and it keeps all those juices in.
And is there a particular salt that you recommend?
Look, we're pretty blessed to have so many good salts out on the market. To be honest, like we do a smoked salt at work now. Is Murray River pink salt. We sell that as well. That's a fantastic salt. We do the kosher salt as well, which a lot of barbecue teams love. That's a really good salt. But yeah, Himalayan salt. Probably talk about salt as much as I could beef, really. But look for a good salt. Source a good salt, and it just creates a better product.
I've fallen in love recently with sea salt flakes.
Yes, yeah. The Malden do a great one. There's the sea salt flakes are unbelievable. And they do. I don't know what it is, but compared to normal texture of salt, you just seem to get a better flavour or better salty flavour through when you're cooking with the flakes. Yeah,
it tastes more natural too than say standard table salt, which is so heavily processed. For me, anyway, I'll take sea salt flakes or pink Himalayan rock salt or kosher salt over your standard iodized table salt. Yes. I don't even think I've had it in the house for about 10 years now.
Yeah, I would be exactly the same. Like, I think this is it's good to see, if we're trending to the way we're caring about the salt we put on our meat, it's just such a good sign for where the food industry is going, like we've just talked for a few minutes on the quality of salt we put on something. I love it. It's fantastic that people are caring about what they put in their mouths,
Couldn't agree more.
This segment is proudly sponsored by Coastline Barbecues and Heating. With stores in Oxenford, Southport and the Tweed, they are the Gold Coast's only Weber specialist.
Alrighty, Billy, time for us to get into our listener questions right now. So we have two ladies that couldn't join us live today, so I'm going to stand in for them and read out their questions to you. We'll then go through the other three questions of the people that are here with us, and at the end of that, you can pick the best question, and that person will be the winner of our $25 gift voucher from Coastline Barbecues. So we'll start with Annabelle's question.
Pressure's on.
Yeah, pressure's on. Yeah, it's get to see who's got the best question. So starting with Annabelle. Annabelle writes, the meat at Billy's is only improved by the service you get every time. What training, motivation, communication skills do you use to keep your staff happy and turnover low, which she thinks would help with the consistency and quality of the meat?
Okay. Well, that's a very good question. I guess when it comes to service, that's probably the pinnacle of what Meat at Billy's is about. We've always, have put our pride and everything into making sure our customers get what they want and they leave happy. I think the best way is I treat my staff the way I treat my customers. They're almost like family to me. My staff now, we work a lot of hours. We spend a lot of time together. I look after them the best I can, and I think that reflects on how they look after customers when I'm not there. Even when I am, I think they see the value of, they don't have a job without the people coming through the door. So it is, they put 110% into giving that customer, every customer that walks through the door, whatever they need. As for the quality control of the product, that's a really good question. As Meat at Billy's has grown, we've had open our second store now, that is always been a stress to me, is how you do control these things. And I think it comes back to the staff, yet again, training them the correct way. I mean, getting them to evaluate every single thing they cut and make sure it is of the standard that Meat at Billy's is all about. We do spend a lot of time one-on-one training with staff. We also do staff meetings where we go through new products. I like to get as much feedback from the guys, the butchers I have with me, to help them do their job better. So, good and bad feedback on what we're doing. So, yeah, it's all about control, but it can be done. It's just, I think, treating your staff with respect is probably the pinnacle of it, and you'll get back what you put in,
Sounds good to me. I completely agree with what Annabelle's saying about the great quality of service from Meat at Billy's. I was heading down to the first Burley competition, and I had sourced someone locally, and they fell through about 48 hours before I was supposed to go to the competition. And I don't know if you remember, but I actually rang you in a panic, saying, "What am I going to do? What am I going to do?"
And I sent the meat down with someone. I don't know. I can't remember who I sent it with, but you did ring up and we delivered it to you down there.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
Is that right?
You talked me through it over the phone, and then you actually packaged it all up in a styrofoam box on ice and sent it down with another team who was picking up their order from you, and they dropped it off to me there on the day. I was blown away by that. It's a year and a half later, and whenever someone says Meat at Billy's, that's the first memory that pops into my mind. So it's
thank you. I'm really, really glad to hear that. For the love of the barbecue, mate. That's what we're here for.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, Kerry's turn. Kerry writes, traditionally the barbecue, the butcher shop and the meat cooking has been the man's domain, but times are changing and women are sharing the stage or taking over the barbecue and smoking scene. Question, how has this changed your retail mindset, and what meat cuts have you seen a spike in?
Yes, another very good question. She is very correct there as far as, seeing the females show some interest, especially in the low and slow. I don't know if the listeners know, but we just did our first all-female low and slow barbecue class a couple of Sundays ago, which came about from, interest in our everyday customers, female customers coming through, as well as, sponsoring the Shank Sisters, one of the teams that I look after, seeing what they've done and seeing them walk into this, I guess you would say it's a bloke's world predominantly. These girls have got in and sort of shown, they're showing these guys that it can be done, and they're doing it very, very well. So I sort of collaborated with them. We pitched the idea, and we went through with our first female low and slow class, and the response was unbelievable. And it was so good to see, women showing interest in how to cook a brisket and how to, light a charcoal kettle, and what can they do on that. I actually think we got more attentiveness out of the ladies than we do out of the normal classes. I think they're more focused on learning than drinking beer and eating barbecue like the boys are. But all in all, it was a really good response. As far as the female side of my business, 65% of my clientele is female still. I mean, traditionally the ladies have always come in and done the shop, and we get a lot of ladies who do come in and shop for their husbands for the barbecue, but it's so good to see, we're starting to get the ladies coming in and buying a brisket and a Boston butt and going home and doing it themselves. It's awesome. It's taking it to the next level, which I love.
Yeah, something I've always loved about barbecue is the way that barbecue can bring people together, and something that I've never sort of understood, something I've always struggled with, is how when it comes to barbecue, there was just this division. And when I say barbecue, I mean all forms of barbecue, low and slow, grilling, whatever it is. It was always, growing up, it was always, my mum would stay inside and she'd make the salads, prep the table, get the drinks ready, do all this sort of stuff. And however many men were at the barbecue would stand outside around the barbecue and burn some sausages and come inside. And so I think it's awesome to see this increase in interest with ladies in low and slow barbecue, because you're going to see that line is going to disappear. And I think people are going to find that their relationships are going to improve. They're going to be getting along better. The whole family's going to be involved in the whole process. And I just think that that's something that we don't often think about, but it's going to be a huge advantage and a huge benefit to families out there.
Yeah, definitely. I think from the male perspective, if the ladies want to take over the barbecue, as long as the man still has a corner he can drink beer in, he'll be more than happy. More than happy.
Fair enough. All righty. Let's hand it over to Peter, you still on the air there, mate?
Yeah, still here, mate.
Alrighty, the microphone is over to you, my friend. Ask Billy what you will.
So I sort of actually have two questions for him. First being, obviously he's been pretty successful in business over the last couple of years since he started. What's been his biggest mistake or misstep so far, and what advice would he give to someone that's starting out in a business?
Yep. How are you, Peter? That's a good question, mate. I think when it comes to business, I don't know if anyone out there in business knows it's hard work, especially the first few years. And I think the biggest mistake I made when I started Meat at Billy's was I tried to be all of Meat at Billy's, which, as you know, I think about 6 months of working 7 days a week, 14 to 17 hours a day, it burnt me out. Probably the biggest mistake I made was trying to have that control and not realising that you need people behind you. You need support, whether it's from family, friends, as well as staff is a pinnacle. Trying to put it all on your shoulders, it'll be a short-lived career. That'd be the biggest mistake I think I made in business. Okay, thanks.
And the other one is, I constantly get into arguments with people about freezing meat, good quality steaks, a lot of your stuff. What are your thoughts on and what damage is done to the meat when you freeze it, texture and flavour-wise?
Nice question.
Look, very good question. I think if you're going to, there's certain elements of meat that can be frozen. So things like chicken breast and even pork, which is not something you're eating, like it doesn't have a high flavour component to it. I think that's fine to freeze. Things like steak, and this is what we were saying about before, if you're going to buy a good steak, I wouldn't freeze it, because when you defrost it, you're losing all that fluid, that moisture, those juices that are left on the plate in the fridge. That's the bit you want. You don't want to be losing that. That should be in your mouth when you're chewing on it. So I think what the best thing you can do is, if you go to the butcher and get them, if you're going to buy a whole steak, get them to cry back it for you individually. As I said earlier, you're going to get months out of your steak in the fridge if they're cry backed, and they're only going to get better as they break down. So take the time, go to your butcher and get your steaks cry back, because they're too expensive. You want to appreciate them, and I just think buy your steak fresh and keep it fresh. That would be my advice to you, Peter.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Billy.
No worries.
Alrighty, Daryl, what would you like to ask Billy?
Billy, first off, I'd like to thank you for being a part of this, and thank our host for giving us the opportunity to have you on here directly.
Thank you, mate. It's an honour, mate. Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
I've got a bloody note paper and I'm writing stuff down, the amount of stuff that's there already. I'm looking forward to listening to the podcast back myself.
Great.
The questions that I had, and you covered a little with when you talk about reverse searing, but one of the big issues I think is being able to seal the meat so you don't lose that moisture. And now you did touch on reverse searing and with the Weber having it off-site and then putting it back onto the heat to seal it later on. Could you just expand a bit on that? And, whether you see, obviously now, having listened to what you've said so far, you're not in favour of sealing it first, more a reverse seal. Is that to go with your longer, slower cooking? Or?
Look, I think I've always been a fan of. I'm not against sealing meat. I think if you're just going to do, when I do the reverse sear, I'm doing it on a large quantity cut steak. So I'm talking 700 grams up to a kilo.
Right.
And that's just going back the traditional sealing way. So browning first for a few minutes and then finishing in the oven. It's fantastic. The pinnacle of getting that crust and keeping that moisture in is actually that salt component that you're putting on the outside of your meat. Right. Because what that does is it does dry out the top of your meat, but as it dries it out, it creates almost like a webbing to trap the rest of the moisture in your meat. Like this is what dry age does. That with that salt component, they're reducing the moisture on the outside of something and creating a bark or a crust to keep everything inside really juicy. So it's a small you're losing a little bit of moisture on the outside, but it should enhance the flavour and the juiciness of your meat on the inside.
Right.
And even if we go away from into your slow cooking, I think that was that more so what you're looking at as well?
Yeah, that's more my concern, yeah. Say ribs and such, a long, slow cook.
Yes, so on the as in like low and slow ribs in the barbecue, or just a casserole in the oven?
No, well, I'm thinking more the low and slow ribs, your kettle or offset or whatever.
Yep. Well, with that, like I said, put in a good rub. Having a good fat coverage is probably pinnacle for not drying out as well. So if you're using, let's talk beef ribs, like we spoke of earlier, the Cape Grim box ribs, they're quite well marbled. Having that is going to be a pinnacle to keeping your ribs juicy, because you want that intramuscular fat or that marbled fat to break down as you're cooking, and that soaks through into your ribs and creates the best eating quality you'll get. So it's a simple case of finding a good product to start with is probably the best thing. Buying the best, and you find that'll reflect on your barbecuing every day.
That's right, and what you were saying earlier is establish a relationship with the butcher. I'm a big one for going into the butcher and saying, what are you having for dinner? And get some guidance there, unless you've got something specific in mind. And having someone like yourself who's happy to have a yarn and not just, you pick what you want out of the window, like some exchange. And that's been a tricky thing. When you are doing your low and slow in the Weber, and you mentioned the old kettle Weber, which is a classic, we all love to play with that. Are you a fan of loading it up and leaving it to sort of seal it and then let it slow down, or are you tinkering, topping up the fuel content?
Look, depending on what I do, I used to do the expression low and slow. I probably am more biased towards hotter and faster. It's still, it's as ironic as it sounds, it still is low and slow, but I like to cook. I'm cooking at 300 Fahrenheit for everything now, instead of 200, 250. I just find the product arcs better. And then when I wrap, I'll usually let the temperature come back to sort of 200, 250. But I think that hot temp for the first, sort of 3-4 hours is pinnacle for me.
Well, that's the way I was thinking, but it's good to hear it from an expert, especially when actually the image that was put up with you standing in front of the offset smoker there, and the meat that's in there just looks magnificent.
That was a great photo, wasn't it? That was a really good photo. All righty, Matthew, how you going there, mate? You want to jump in here and ask your question to Billy?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Billy. How you doing?
Good, Matt. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good, man. Again, thanks for giving us the opportunity to have a chat, and thanks, Ben. Thanks for setting this up for us.
You're welcome.
No dramas.
I've got like a bit of a question that I'd like to ask. It's a bit of a two-pronged question. First part, how do you see the rise of supermarkets impacting on the local community butchers? And what thoughts do you have on getting people back into those local butchers?
That's a great question, mate. I guess, look, the supermarkets has been something of a concern for, over a decade to butchers and, to fruit shops, to bakeries. The rise of the supermarket has really killed independent business Australia-wide. I don't think there's any other country in the world that has where you've got two commercial chains that control pretty much 80% of the retail market. It's corrupt. I could go on for hours about it. It's a thorn in my side, and I'm quite passionate about it. I think what we've seen is 10 years ago we saw butchers shutting up. We could actually probably have a lot to thank to the supermarkets now with how they've grown so big. They've lost that quality, they've lost that service. They've almost sending people back to us because, the media's helped us a lot too, as far as people now are aware of how they treat their farmers and how they treat their small producers they buy off, and they're screwing them down on contract price. And some of these farmers are losing every day and they don't have a choice. And, the middleman Coles and Woolies example are the ones making, millions out of it. So that has a big part to do with it. as far as what me to Billy's at Ashgrove, we've got Aldi, Coles, and Woolies all around us. And for me, I'm grateful for them because they bring people there to do their shopping, but people are taking the effort to walk 400 metres around the corner to come to Billy's to buy their meat because, you know, we back it up with the service. You know, you can walk into a supermarket. How can you guarantee every steak is labelled MSA? How can you guarantee they're all MSA? There's no way you can. They've bought that label pretty much. The label we used to be proud of, and they've bastardised it. And you know for a fact, as well as probably most of the listeners, they have no control over what they do. So that stuff, cracks are showing in their monopoly now, and that's also bought independent butchers specifically back. I think I was talking to one of my suppliers last week. For the first time in 20 years, he's seen more butcher shop accounts created in this business than every other year he's been losing them, which is a sign of the strength and times ahead for independent butchering. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. But they're a catch-22. They did ruin us at the beginning, but if anything, they're putting us from strength to strength now. So
right.
That's awesome. I find that the big difference for me is the quality of the service. You know, you go into an independent butcher shop, you actually get to meet a butcher and talk to a butcher and get advice from the butcher. And I honestly cannot remember the last time I went into a supermarket and actually saw a butcher in there.
No, well, there's not many left in there. I think they've cut them. They do a lot of it off site now, and it's all pre-packaged and put through. But you know, I'd like to put a big thank you out to you guys, our customers too, you know, because, you know, when I started butchering, it was something, you tell people you're a butcher, they sort of screwed their face up, you know. Now people walk into our shop and want to shake our hand, you know, like your guys' interest in what we do creates more pride for us. And yeah, it makes us proud of what we do. And it's just fantastic that there is so much interest in our industry and what we do. We love it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy, mate. Thank you. Alrighty, Billy. So those were our 5 listener questions. So I just need you to let me know which one you think should win our $25 gift voucher.
Mate, I think I'm going to go with Matthew on that one. I think the supermarket question was right on the money. Yeah, it's one that I'm quite passionate about too. So as far as I'm concerned, he's the winner.
All righty, congratulations, Matthew. We'll get that gift voucher out to you shortly. Well done.
Thank you.
All righty, Billy, for our last question in our podcast interview today, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for new barbecue competition teams?
I sound like I'm repeating myself now, but I'd say relationship with a good butcher would be the first thing. Sourcing good meat. That's the foundation of everything. I guess second bit of advice would be drink beer. It seems to be what happens. One thing I love about these barbecue competition scenes is like it is a competition, but I've never seen such a friendly competition in anything, any sport or any game that I've ever been involved with before. Like everybody knows everybody. They're all great blokes. They love to have a drink, and they are incredibly helpful, like I said. So yeah, put yourself out there, be social, and I can tell you, I can rattle off a heap of teams who I've had many a beers with, and they're all good blokes, and they love. If you're a new person and you're getting into it, these guys are full of great advice, and they'll steer you in the right direction.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember my the very first competition I ever went to, I was a ring-in at the last minute, and I had no idea about presentation boxes. And I remember going there and seeing the teams all sitting there chopping up parsley and putting it into boxes and going, well, I eventually built up the courage to go over and ask, and I said, what are you all doing? And they said, we've got to prepare our presentation boxes. And they sat down for like 20 minutes and explained it all to me, showed me all how to do it, and then gave me a bunch of their extra stuff so I could go and pack my boxes, which would have otherwise been empty. So I can't think of, like you wouldn't see a professional tennis player, handing their racket over to somebody else to go and play with, So
no, you're exactly right. That's what I love about it. It is such a good, friendly scene, and they're all top blokes, top girls that are all involved in it. It's awesome.
Excellent, excellent. All right, I'm going to hand the mic over to you, Billy, for a minute or two to give some shout outs and tell people where they can contact you.
Okay. Big thank you to everyone listening today. Meet at Billy's. We have 2 stores. One is located in Ashgrove on 241 Waterworks Road. Phone number 33662912. We have another store not far away in Paddington, or Rosalie Village is what it's called. That's on Baroona Road, 155, just down from the cinemas. The phone number there is 3367 3888. I should know that one by now. Yep, I'm getting the nod. I got it right. Also, we're 100% online. We deliver to a lot of suburbs around the inner Brisbane area. So all the low and slow cuts right through to your everyday barbecuing and kitchen cooking, anything, you name it. We've got it on our website, and we do deliver anything over $100 is free delivery, and we deliver Monday to Friday. You've got till midnight the night before to put your order in, and it will be delivered the next day, depending on what time suits you. That is also an option. Don't forget, when you do go in, there is a low and slow category. Sorry, I'm getting coached here. I always forget when it comes to a plug. But yeah, big thank you to Ben for the opportunity today. I really appreciate it. And thank you to all my customers who are listening too. I really appreciate your support. Couldn't do it without you.
I just want to throw a big thank you back to you too, Billy, for giving up your time today. I realise that you're a busy man, and to take time out of your day to come on this show and talk to me about it and share your knowledge with the listeners out there. Much appreciated, and so much gratitude heading your way.
Oh, thank you very much. A lot of love today. A lot of love.
Yeah, so much. All righty. Thanks very much.
No worries.
Thanks for listening to the Smoking Hot Confessions podcast. Head on over to smokinghotconfessions.com for recipes, tips, and Ben's own confessions.